So next we want to talk about the new CPI report, which tracks inflation for the month of March. When it came out, it was kind of bad news.
Bad news.
Inflation is stickier than expected. The overall number is 3.5%. The core number is 3.7%. Remember that core inflation number strips out volatile food and energy costs. It's bad news. The markets hated it because it implies that the Fed might have to wait longer to cut interest rates. But there were some interesting things in it, and I don't think it's as much of a downer as it might seem initially.
Why is it a downer? I think it's a downer politically. I think it's a downer for your retirement account for the near future.
Sure.
Is it a downer for the overall economy? No, it's not. It's not. We're talking about inflation differences of 0.3 expected versus 0.4 actual.
Yes.
We're not actually saying we're in a crazy. It's just that's not what's going on.
Yes. It's worse that it's not continuing to go down.
Yeah.
Because the Fed is hoping to see these inflation numbers. And also part of why it's not that big of a deal is because this isn't even the Fed's preferred inflation number. Mm-hmm. They wait for this is the CPI number. They wait for the PCE number, which comes out at the end of the month. So I'm more interested in what is driving this up. What is keeping this core inflation so high? One of the things is housing, which we have talked about many times that we've talked about inflation. Housing is a great example of something that is sticky because it is structural. We can't build enough housing because the zoning laws in this country in all of our densely populated areas don't allow it, and because local control means that everybody who lives in the places that might build more housing don't want more housing to be built because they think it'll drive down their property values and it'll change the look and the feel of their neighborhoods. Ooh, so scary. So because of that, housing prices keep going up. Rents are still going up. But I think a really interesting wrinkle that I want to talk about is auto prices, specifically auto insurance prices and auto repair prices. Auto insurance has gone up over 20% in the last year. It's one of the biggest items on the CPI report and has been. And it went up 2.6% even just in the month of March.
And this is a big story. This was on the front page or one of the first couple pages of the New York Times a couple days ago.
It's been in the Times. It's been in Vox.
Very big story.
Yes. It's interesting. And so the question is why? There are a few answers. One, auto insurance, auto repairs, intuitively, you can kind of understand that they would lag inflation of actual cars, of new cars specifically, right? Because as prices go up for new cars, now those new cars are being bought by people and some time is passing before they're getting into accidents and they need to get those parts replaced. And then as that time passes, then as they start to get into more accidents with those newer, more expensive cars, the insurance companies have to pay more to get those cars repaired. So a big part of that, a big part of why cars are more expensive, one is because of supply chain issues that happened during COVID, backlogs or like kind of clogs in supply chain of semiconductors that are used in cars, a bunch of other parts. But also cars are just better, right? Almost all new cars now, they have the sensors on the bumpers, right, that alert the driver when they're getting too close to something. They've all got these built-in touchscreens now that show you a map. And EVs on their own with these massive batteries in them are super expensive. So because these cars and all of the parts and components that go into them are more expensive when they have to be replaced, the insurance companies have to pay more. Because of that, they're covering their costs by increasing premiums.
Yeah, and they have no choice but to increase premiums with these things. And so like Ben and I were in a car a couple weeks ago, and we got in an argument with one of our friends because the car had a backup camera on it. But the backup camera, or like the rear view mirror, wasn't actually a mirror. It was a camera and a screen on the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
And one of my friends is like, that's so cool. Another one of my friends is like, no, that's stupid. That's a waste of thing. And I said during the conversation, I'm like, this is bad because it means that anytime, you get rear-ended, you don't just have to fix your bumper. Now you have to replace the camera that was in the bumper that makes your rear view camera work.
Exactly.
And so all of those little things that makes cars better, makes cars safer, all those things actually make them more expensive and is going to make car insurance more expensive.
Yeah.
And then you're telling me that people are more likely to get into accidents recently.
Yes, this is another thing that's been reported. Specifically, this was the Vox report that I read, is that since COVID, distracted driving has gone through the roof, which makes a ton of sense to me because during COVID, we're all stuck inside. TikTok is exploding. We're all getting way more addicted to our phones. People's attention spans are dropping that much more. I feel like, anecdotally, when I'm on the street, every third car I see go by has the driver looking at their phone.
Oh, yeah, easily.
Yeah. So since distracted driving is worse, accidents are more common and accidents are often more violent. So when that happens, car insurance companies, their costs go up. They have to pay more. Premiums have to cover that. But as far as the side of cars being technologically advanced, I do want to talk about, like, we always think of inflation as just this bad thing. It's a net bad. This is a case where I want us to zoom out and say, you know what? Part of being a good economy is making better things. Is using the additional money that people have to make cars that have cameras that make it easier to see behind us so we don't bump into things, to make bumpers that have sensors. It is kind of paradoxical, I guess, in this case, that because we also have this phone that distracts us from driving, even though we have all of this additional technology trying to make us safer, we're still screwing ourselves.
Yeah.
But the idea of, like, okay, more money means more expensive stuff, but better stuff is kind of what we're supposed to be going for.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're making better stuff. It just costs more money.
Yeah.
But the fact that that's one of the stickiest aspects, I shouldn't even say the word sticky. The fact that that's one of the most spiking aspects in our consumer price index just kind of shows how non-political a lot of this inflation data is.
Totally.
Like, it's just non-political.
Yeah.
It's just a changing of the times.
Yeah.
Shelter, that's political. There are political actions and choices we can make to change our housing costs, totally. Right? But we're talking about car insurance spiking 22%. There's nothing Joe Biden can do to change that.
No.
There's nothing Joe Biden can do to affect that. The transition to EVs, I think, will correspond with a rise in obvious car insurance. Like these car company, these mechanics, they've been working on gas cars and combustion engines their whole life.
Yeah.
And now they got to switch business models and learn how to do it. That takes a learning curve.
Yes.
Right?
Definitely.
Learning how to do the mechanic work. This is a very human process.
Yes.
This isn't political, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So it's a part of shifting our economy. It's not like there's nothing that Joe Biden or any of our elected officials could really do with a lot of this information.
Yeah, and I mean, what goes along with that is not just the insurance, but why auto repairs are like the second highest thing on the list of inflation metrics.
And so now, what does this mean for the Federal Reserve? So 3 months ago, what we've been thinking that the Federal Reserve was going to cut rates approximately 3 times throughout the year of 2024. That was the goal. And what they wanted to see was a relatively good inflation report this month. Well, they didn't get it. And it's hard for me to say they didn't get it when the expected was 0.3 and the actual was 0.4 because it's so minute.
Yeah.
And so much of it is driven by such non-political and non-interest rate bearing factors.
Yes.
Right? Like your car insurance premiums aren't really affected by interest rates.
No, but I do understand. I mean,
Yes.
first of all, this is a blunt tool that the Fed has.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, if interest rates aren't going to affect car insurance, but hopefully they bring down everything else to an extent that inflation overall is that 2% number.
Right. What they're really trying to go after there is like housing costs by doing some of the interest rate things. But so 3 months ago, the Federal Reserve watchers expected the interest rate to be to 4% by December. 2 months ago, they thought it would be 4.2 by December. 1 month ago, they changed it again to 4.4 by December, and now the latest forecast is 4.8 by December. So we're talking a whole percentage point less of rate cuts that we would have expected just 3 months ago.
That's huge.
That's huge.
That is huge.
That's huge. Now, there are political avenues to this. So let's talk about the political one first. This isn't good for Biden's reelection campaign. This isn't good for Democrats broadly. This isn't good for the party in power, period. a rate cut will lead to a booming stock market. A rate cut will lead to more investment, and all of that will help boost economic growth and the like.
Yeah.
So prolonging the rate cut isn't good for the party in power because their economy won't look as good. How about for the economy generally? Do I think that prolonging the rate cuts by another month or two is going to have a big impact on inflation? I don't really relatively think so, to be honest. That's like a pretty, maybe that's just my layman's opinion. But I don't know how much a 2-month, 3-month delay in interest rate cuts impacts inflation. I don't know.
I don't think about it that way though. I think about it more like they project the interest rate cuts to be further off because they need more time to be confident that inflation is coming down.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, it's not about whether the timing will change the inflation. It's just in whether the inflation is actually changing. But I think I think the rates, it might be important still to keep them up. Like I don't know.
And the fact that we're in a booming economy.
That's the other part that I just forgot, but I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, the fact that we're in a booming economy, despite rates being so high.
Exactly.
It makes the Fed feel like they don't really need to do anything.
Yes.
Right? It makes the Fed feel like we're kind of chilling. Let's not rock the boat.
Yeah, and I feel like we should refer to the jobs report that came out for March as well.
Which was fucking great.
Which was blockbuster, and we have these blockbuster job reports that we just keep talking about and keep talking about. And it's going to mean that, like, why reduce interest rates? I mean, besides politically, which the Fed is not allowed to do, and I don't think they do.
No, they don't.
So economically, they're just kind of fine to have.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about the transition to green energy, that's one area where we really want to see a rate cut.
Yes.
Because so much of the green energy is capital front heavy.
Exactly.
You have to put in a lot of money at the beginning to reap the rewards later on.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is people don't sit on a ton of liquidity to invest in green energy. They have to take out loans, which means that if interest rates are high for longer, it delays our ability to make the transition. It delays the ability for people to buy electric vehicles.
Yep.
It delays the ability for large utility companies to commit to these long-term projects.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're like, you know what, let's delay it a year. If we delay it a year, we get better interest payments on our debt.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they're going to want to wait until rates go down. So those are areas where I do think a rate cut matters a lot.
Yes, that is extremely true. And to me, it just makes me wish, again, that we could have some zoning reform.
Yeah.
Fix our housing problems so that we didn't have this constantly skyrocketing rents for as long as we have an increasing population, even though an increasing population is something we want for the sake of our economy.
And then opposite side of this, rents aren't increasing everywhere. You go to the city of Austin, they saw a 9% decrease in rents from last year.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Because they saw massive amounts of construction, massive amounts of zoning reform, but mostly construction. What's happening is they are building in Austin, and because they're building, they're able to keep their rents down, actually decreasing. We're not even talking about the rates of rent slowing.
Yeah, well, Austin kind of overbuilt come COVID
Yes.
because there was a huge, not exodus out. I don't know what the opposite of exodus is.
Inflow?
Yeah, influx. Huge influx of people into Austin. And then once that cooled off, the developers were like, shit. Well, we can't really get a huge profit off of this anymore.
Yeah. So that's where we are right now with the CPI report and our inflation data. And we'll see how long we have to wait until the rate cut finally comes around.